But what I do know is that the hierarchy is made up of Lavender Mafia types. I asked all my Jesuit friends what they thought the percentage was of Jesuits in power that are modernists, and no one gave me less than 90%. You know, if you look at it today, the face of the Jesuits is not Father Fessio or Father Mitch Pacwa. The face of the Jesuits is Father James Martin.
Karen Hall is on the show. She's an incredible woman. She has written and been a part of many television productions out of Hollywood. You might have heard a few of them. Let's see, MASH, Hill Street Blues, Moonlighting, Northern Exposure. I mean, there's just so many of them. And she's also an author, and her most recent book is this one next to me, which I have read, The Sound of Silence, The Life and the Canceling of a Heroic Jesuit Priest. I've read this book. It's a great book. I'm interested to have the conversation about Father Paul Mankowski. Why did the Jesuits silence him? And why did he stay a Jesuit when he could have left and had freedom elsewhere? Why did he stay? By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below. Karen is joining us. So let's start with, who was Father Paul Mankowski and why was he a Jesuit?
He was a Jesuit because, according to him, God called him to be a Jesuit at the time that God called him to be a priest. He was a Jesuit from the Chicago province, and he stood out among Jesuits because he was very conservative, and that's what ultimately got him into trouble with them. When he took his vows to be a Jesuit, you take a vow to live and die in the Jesuits. And as far as he was concerned, he had taken a vow to God, and he wasn't going to break it. But the thing that he told me that I loved was, he said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm right," which is kind of how I feel about things going on in the church right now. I was doing research for a show. I sold a show to AMC, and it was called Vows, and it was set in, when I pitched it, I said a Jesuit seminary because ABC or whoever, AMC executives didn't understand that Jesuits don't have seminaries. They have houses of formation. And so when I got ready to write it, I wanted to go and research and find out what are their lives like, because I was going to have to write them. And so I was actually invited to stay at the Arupe House, which is the Jesuit residence at the University of Loyola in Chicago. And so when I was invited, they gave my research assistant, who was helping me through the trip, they gave him 2 pages of an itinerary that sounded great, included things like dinner with the president, and also I was going to attend a meeting that lay people weren't allowed to attend, and all sorts of things. So it was going to be great for me in terms of research. And then they had planned to have a cocktail reception for me the night I got there, and I couldn't do it because, as I told them, I was having dinner with a friend in Chicago that night. And my research assistant who stayed behind said that for the rest of the evening, the talk was about, who's Karen having dinner with. And they had read my blog and they knew I was conservative, and so they got nervous that it might be Paul. So the next morning, the man who was in charge of the community asked me who I had dinner with. And I thought about saying my friend Sue, because I have a friend named Sue in Chicago, but then I thought, no, I'm just going to say it. And so I said Paul Mankowski, and he got quiet. And then when I got back to my room, I had a couple of things I did that afternoon. I went to some classes. When I got back to my room, I think I didn't notice anything that day, but I got up the next morning, went to the place where they have breakfast, and I had visited another scholastic community before that, and what had happened was I'd sit down at a table, and then here would come everybody who wanted to tell me their story. So it wasn't hard to get the research. So I tried that, and nobody came to sit at my table.
Wow.
And I got up to go get coffee, and the priest who was in front of me getting coffee, I said, "Good morning." And he did not answer me and turned and walked away. So I sat down and I
Wow.
was starting to suspect that something was going on. And I looked around the room, nobody would meet my eyes. And, here I am, I stand out in a Jesuit community. Um, and so I went back to my room and I got in touch with my research assistant and found out that my entire itinerary had gone away. So,
But they were
then they were
vindictive. They were utterly vindictive towards you.
um, trying to figure out how to answer that without having to go to confession. But yes, I think they assumed that because I, was from Hollywood, that I would be on board with, all modernist things. So they were surprised, and it was like the enemy is in the house. So the guy who actually was Paul's provincial sent out an email that went to 3 provinces. So I was banned in 3 Jesuit provinces.
Wow. That's a
I don't know
mark
how
of
many people
distinction.
I was going to say, there are many people
badge of
who
honor.
aren't Jesuits who can make that claim. Yes.
They definitely went to war against Father Paul Mankowski, and he won that war in the end, it would seem. But why did they do that? What was it about his conservatism that they didn't like so much?
There were 2 things they didn't like. There were 2, third rail subjects. And one was he believed in the church's teaching on sexuality and alternative lifestyles. And the other was that he was pro-life. And I have a Jesuit friend who was a good friend of Paul's who keeps trying to make me understand that they hated him more for being pro-life than for being, against alternative lifestyles. And I cannot wrap my head around that.
No.
Because, what dog in the fight do celibate men have? And they're Catholics, so they should be in favor of life. So I don't understand that. I trust my friend that it's true, but I don't really understand it. I have theories, but I'll save those for the next book.
It seems that homosexuality is a plague in the Jesuits today. Is that a fair assessment? Am I overthinking that? Well, what do you say?
Here's what I think, because I don't know the ratio of, Lavender Mafia Jesuits to Jesuits like Paul. But what I do know is that the hierarchy is made up of Lavender Mafia types. I asked all my Jesuit friends what they thought the percentage was of Jesuits in power that are modernists, and no one gave me less than 90%.
Wow.
Some people gave me 100. I know. So that's what his problem was. And, if you look at it today, the face of the Jesuits is not Father Fessio or Father Mitch Pacwa. The face of the Jesuits is Father James Martin.
Yeah.
And that should tell you a lot.
So what was the research that Father Paul did that included the Jesuit general that seemed to make them look bad, that they didn't like?
What was going on at the time is there was a Jesuit congressman named Robert Drinan. He ran as a Democrat from Massachusetts. And the Jesuits were very proud and happy to have a Jesuit congressman, but he was very liberal, and he worked hard toward causes related to abortion. And, he would have Jesuitical language to tell you that he wasn't really doing that. He was just trying to, I don't know. I haven't read it recently. I don't know. But when Bill Clinton came out against the ban on partial birth abortion, Robert Drinan sided with him. And so Paul had done the research to write an article about their Father General Pedro Rupe, because what Paul wanted the article to say was that Robert Drinan running for Congress was an American construct. It was kind of the wheels were turning over here, but that their Father General had told him not to run. And so that's what he was going to write the article about. And that's why they were happy to give him the research, because he was going to say nice things about their liberal Father General. When he started doing the research, he realized that was not, in fact, the case. And the case was that it was kind of don't run for Congress. And Robert Drinan saying, I'm sorry, my phone is breaking up. And so it just kind of slid along like that. And so Paul decided he couldn't write the article because it couldn't say what he wanted to say. So he gave all the research to a man named James Hitchcock, who was a famous church historian, just to have it for posterity. And then when the thing came out with Bill Clinton and the partial birth abortion ban, which Robert Drinan was citing against, James Hitchcock felt like it was time to tell this story. And so he told it. He wrote the story of, Paul Mankowski, who had done this research and what the research showed. And he offered to let Paul, to just talk about Paul anonymously, so that Paul wouldn't have to take the heat. And Paul kind of characteristically said no to that because, he didn't want the heat to fall on anyone but him if the heat was going to fall. And it did. And so that was when they officially silenced him. For about a decade before that, he had been writing conservative articles that I'm sure they were not thrilled about. But this was what they could really pin it on. So that's what they did. And that's when they told him that he could no longer write under his byline. And then what he did after that, in a very Jesuitical move, is that he adopted a pseudonym, Diogenes, and wrote under that for a while. And Diogenes had a big fan club. Everybody loved Diogenes. And finally, they figured out that it was him, and so they told him he couldn't write under any byline. And so then he was silenced.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.